Now, Nicole, starting with you, how did it feel to see that Carlton received the nation's highest honour, an AM, just 6 days ago when he had spoken about you in that way?
Sharri, I was completely shocked and really disappointed. To give your audience a little bit more of an idea of the context in which he made those comments, during that Q&A program, Jimmy Barnes spoke at length about the utterly shocking domestic violence and abuse of women that he had personally witnessed in his life. He spoke about how on his sister's wedding night, her husband tied her hair in a barbed wire fence and proceeded to nearly beat her to death. He spoke about how he'd seen his mum's friends, be at their house with black eyes and fat lips, and he'd seen his mum lying on the floor. So that was the broader context about terrible violence against women that Jimmy Barnes spoke about during that Q&A program. And during that Q&A program, Mike Carlton thought it was appropriate to suggest that Jimmy was exercising great constraint by not strangling me.
It's just extraordinary. Amanda, Penny Wong and Christina Keneally moved a motion when Bettina Arndt was recognised in the Australia Day honours earlier this year, but they were pretty much silent when it came to Mike Carlton. Do you find this odd?
I find it utterly hypocritical. When Bettina Arndt was given an Australia Day award, the fact that she had retweeted a policeman's comment that suggested a person who had set his family on fire in the most horrendous of circumstances should be considered with an open mind, that was alone enough for them to call for her award to be taken away, for there to be speech after speech of condemnation of violence against women. It literally gobbled up most of the day in the Senate. And yet, Mike Carlton, who is awarded for being a broadcaster and print journalist of such standing that he should be honoured as a nation's best, doesn't seem to be able to engage with another person who disagrees with him without resorting to abuse, and yet the left is silent. You cannot say that you stand against people encouraging violence. You cannot say you stand against racism when you only take that stand against people who aren't in your political tribe. Either it's wrong or it's right. If it's wrong no matter who says it. And so the kind of hypocrisy we've seen by their silence this week is utterly unacceptable.
Sarah Henderson, what do you think about this? Do you agree with Amanda that there's hypocrisy in the attitude of women on the left, that they only care about this issue when it's them that are being attacked?
Sharri, absolutely. We've seen this on many occasions, but this is a glaring example of women of the left not speaking up when the wrong thing is said by people like Mike Carlton. And frankly, the fact that we have spoken up and said he should not have received this award is a shocking reflection on Labor. No one has said a thing. And that's one of the reasons why we are asking for a review of the honours and awards system in Australia, including on the grounds of eligibility.
Now, you've all three called for this review in interviews you've done with me this week, and I've been writing about it in the Daily Telegraph, and you've each, along with many other of your colleagues, written letters to the minister responsible, the Assistant Minister for the Prime Minister, Ben Moreton, saying that it's time the process for issuing the Australian honours and award system is reviewed. There hasn't been a review in 25 years. Nicole, have you got any indication from Ben Moreton or from the Prime Minister that he understands the offence this award has caused and that they will do a review?
Both Minister Moreton and the Prime Minister have been wonderfully supportive of me. Your audience may remember that the Prime Minister made some incredibly strong statements after the election about the sexist and misogynist behaviour that I was subject to during the election campaign, and they've both been wonderful throughout this week. And certainly I've had some long conversations with Minister Moreton discussing what we might be able to look at. He knows my views. He heard me out. I just think we need to look at implementing some basic standards, Sharri, because I do not believe that someone like Mike Carlton should be held up as an exemplary Australian, as somebody that should be revered as one of our, our most outstanding Australians, because that's the point of our Queen's Birthday Honours and our Australia Day Honours, is to hold people up so that they can inspire other Australians to be their very best. And that's certainly not the behaviour that we have seen from Mr Carlton.
Yeah. Look, now to a couple of other topics. Amanda, the PM has announced that the free childcare will finish on July 12, with JobKeeper coming off the childcare industry before other sectors. This has sparked some criticism that it's unfair to women who do the brunt of childcare arrangements. What's your view on this?
I actually think those criticisms are misplaced. The COVID arrangements were brought in because there was a crisis that affected the viability of the childcare sector, because demand went from the usual amount to zero almost overnight as people pulled their children out, concerned about keeping them safe from COVID-19. We've now seen demand bounce back to 74%. Of course, the people who are using childcare are people who are in work, so they should have, at least in the vast majority of cases, their usual capacity to pay the costs of childcare. And it should also be noted that we've got in the childcare sector an enormous transition package to the tune of $708 million that's designed to help childcare centres maintain high staffing levels during this period, so that we can make sure we're getting quality care, so that people have the confidence they need to get back to work, and so that childcare centres are able to cope by paying people their normal wages without the benefit of JobKeeper. Now, there's some of the criticism is that there's been a withdrawal of JobKeeper early from the childcare sector. In practical terms, though, the sector is much better off, including all of the employees. And the reason for that is that the childcare sector is one in which many people weren't eligible for JobKeeper in the first place, because there's a lot of people who aren't permanent residents of Australia working in the sector. So with this transition payment, people working in the sector who didn't necessarily meet the criteria for JobKeeper are going to get the benefits, rather than finding that some people were and some people weren't. This is what the industry asked for. The people who are being asked to pay their usual rates for childcare are people back at work. And this reflects the fact that the childcare sector was touched first, along with hospitality and retail, by the impact of COVID-19.
Sarah, what do you think of this idea that the recession is unfairly affecting women, and that there's been a Morrison government stimulus for the construction sector, but not for the areas where women mainly work?
Well, Sharri, this is actually based on a false premise. So the home builder package, which was announced, is worth around about $680 million. And in fact, as Amanda has just mentioned, the transition package that we are providing to the childcare sector is valued at $708 million. So there's really no basis to be comparing the construction package and saying that women are worse off. And in fact, any family still on JobKeeper will be able to access a subsidy up to 95% of the fee up to the cap rate, so that they can return to work and still, of course, pay very, very little by way of childcare. It's an incredibly generous scheme. Ordinarily, some of the more disadvantaged families get a subsidy of 85% of the childcare fee. So now we are providing this additional support, and also, as Amanda mentioned, a broader number of workers will be able to access this relief, those who are on visas and also casuals who've been in one workplace for less than 12 months. So it's really has no basis. And I'm absolutely delighted, because of the demand in the childcare sector. More and more people are getting back to work, that we're really hopeful, of course, that with this support, we will see childcare centres back to full operation, and families being properly supported as they return to work.
Yeah.